Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 29 of the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a comedic spin on all the goings-on in the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and I come to you from the great white, but currently blue and rainy, north every Tuesday evening, Eastern Standard Time, fresh for download to listen to at work on Wednesday morning for everyone all around the world. This podcast comes to you each and every week ad-free, completely ad-free, and all that I ask is for you to subscribe on any podcasting platform or over on YouTube and tell your friends about me either in person or with a share over on the social medias. That would mean the world to me. So I don't know if you can tell because who knows, maybe I have fantastic editing skills or maybe I'm just getting lucky right now, but I am sick this week, so it is going to be a shorter episode. I've been trying to save my voice today. It's one of those where I'm just starting to get a cold right now, so next week might be even worse, but hopefully I'm fine by next week. And I really just want to tell everyone, I want to encourage everyone who hasn't yet to check out last week's episode on Hong Kong. It's 50 minutes of what's going on, and I close with my own perspective on where things could go from here. I think it's totally worth it. There was a whole lot of research that went into it. I have basically like 7 or 8 pages of jot notes written down, and I have a whole Word document full of Hong Kong information that didn't make it to the show, but I really want everyone to check it out. This week I might even repost that one over this week's episode, but thank you for checking out this week's episode either way, because this one's going to be fun. It's kind of serious topics, but more of a casual discussion rather than otherwise. So first of all, I want to get into something that happened this past week for the first time in a long time. So without any further ado, why don't we get to it? This past week, for the first time in roughly 14 years, a manned submarine dove all the way down to the 3,810 meters deep. I didn't write that in footage, but you can convert to the real world, peoples. To the wreckage of the HMS Titanic at 3,800 meters. It is a super deep and super difficult wreckage to get to. So it's very difficult to get to mainly because of its depth. And although there really isn't much to be done down there, right? You can't get out and swim around. You're kind of stuck to what you go down in. The one interesting fact we did learn this time is actually that it's deteriorating at a substantially quicker rate than believed. Of course, as I mentioned, people have gone down before, and in the last 14 years, we've sent down rovers, but of course, nothing is really as good as just sending someone down in a glass ball to risk their lives and see what's up with the Titanic today. And when first found, the wreckage, that is, it was believed that the ship sank in one piece, and that there was hope, at least, that maybe we could raise it to the surface one day. And I think it was covered in the Titanic movie, the extended edition on, that 2-cassette VHS that everyone had. Nowadays, however, we've learned that the ship actually broke in two. We just learned that on its way down. And much of the larger equipment actually fell through the tear in the boat and sunk to the bottom. So there is no hope of raising the Titanic to the surface one day. Womp womp. On top of this, the metal is deteriorating substantially faster than we could have imagined. And it has several cave-ins and collapsed sections. And it's really interesting, mainly because we've analyzed this wreckage so much, right? And there's so much we know about how about metals and the science behind rust and deterioration. We kind of had an idea of the timeline that the Titanic would survive, but what we really didn't realize until this most recent dive is the impact of deep ocean currents on the Titanic wreckage and other wreckages, of course, because apparently it turns out that the currents in this area actually change quite often, several times a year. So, for half the year, it might be a strong water pressure from one direction pushing against it, all this salt water just blasting against the side of the ship. And then in a month or two, it might switch from another direction. And then a few weeks after that, it might be another direction. And then a few months after that, another direction. And you can just imagine like walking around this massive ship with a sandblaster and just blasting this side today, blasting that side tomorrow. Eventually, it deteriorates a lot faster than just standing in one spot and damaging one side. So, unfortunately, it seems like the amount of time we have to dive to the ship is a lot shorter. There is a scientist who's put out there that he believes within the next 10 years, the wreckage itself will have completely fallen apart and just kind of be a heap of metal on the ground. I haven't been able to confirm that, but, a decade is what they are giving us now, which is a little unfortunate. And there's only a bit of footage and photo available right now of these most recent dives, but a documentary about the 6 dives, because they did 6 dives over the course of about a week and a half. All 6 are going to be made into this documentary film, and that's in production for us all to see hopefully at least, what the ship looks like today, which is really cool, and it's something to look forward to probably mid to late next year. But much like Celine Dion's heart, we've got to go on, and hashtag there was room for 2 on the board. With the latest round of G7 meetings wrapping up, the ever-present issue of Russia's seat at the table is again being brought into question. Most of you likely grew up hearing about the G8 summit, which is a group of the most advanced economies in the world, at least according to them, I should say at least according to us, made up of the US, Russia, France, Germany, Canada, the UK, Japan, and Italy, with a representative of the EU present, but not in an official status. However, since Russia's annexation of Crimea, the G8 decided unanimously, of course, aside from Russia, to suspend Russia, and the following year, Russia actually removed itself officially from the group, which then formed the G7, because, of course, 8 minus 1 equals 7. It's been this way since 2015, but with many new leaders now attending the meetings from all these different countries, a sentiment led by President Trump has begun to spread that Russia should perhaps be allowed back to formally recreate what was once known as the G8. Trump's argument is that Crimea is essentially under Russian control now, and he believes they may have had a chance to stop it had he been in power. There was a fantastic press conference today all about this. However, it wasn't stopped, and we can't keep looking backwards. Basically, we could have stopped it. We didn't. We weren't able to. Whatever. We can't keep looking backwards. Trump claims it was entirely President Obama's fault that Crimea was annexed as a means to not appear embarrassed on the world stage. He says that Obama likely led the group to suspend Russia, and that's kind of how he saved his image on the world stage. It was a way to get back at Russia and still look powerful by not really doing anything. Germany and the UK, which are right now both controlled by left and right-wing governments respectively, along with Canada, who first raised the issue in 2014, have argued back that the annexation of Crimea was too big a step away from democracy to be allowed at the summit. Of course, the people of Crimea had no choice in the matter. Russia quite literally strolled through the gates with their tanks one day and called it their own. And there was not much the Ukraine can do. The EU decided not to do anything. Obama decided to kind of stand aside and let them figure it out. The EU, as I just said, ended up not doing anything, and now it became Russia's. So those three nations, again, the UK, Germany, and Canada, are really pushing back against Russia joining because it's just not democratic, and that's the idea of the whole group of seven, formerly the group of eight. French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron agreed with Trump publicly that ties with Russia are an important step in maintaining safe and effective global affairs. However, he did not say that they should be invited back. He did not actually go that far. There's a spider falling down from the ceiling on me. I killed it. It's okay. Ew. I'm not going to cut that out. So where was I? Russia. So Emmanuel Macron said that Russia is important in maintaining safe and effective global affairs. However, he didn't go as far as saying that they should be invited back. Japan's Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Abe, made no statements publicly, but according to officials, he agreed entirely with Trump in private sessions and made all other attendees aware of his and Japan's stance. So, at least as far as we know, Donald Trump and Shinzo Abe are the only two who think that Vladimir Putin should be openly welcome back and revert from G7 to the G8. Macron thinks that the G7 countries should work with Putin, but he did not say that they should be invited back. And there was a little bit more to this because, as I read a little bit further, Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson, the recently elected, he wasn't really elected, it's kind of complicated, but he recently took over as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Basically, his party was in power, their leader stepped down, and the party itself elects a leader from within. That's how parliamentary politics works. If you're Canadian, you should know that. If you're an American or from somewhere else in the world, it's kind of complicated. It's not the most democratic way to do things, but it's how we do it. And it's how they do it over in the UK. Essentially, Boris Johnson said to Emmanuel Macron, and this is, again, away from the cameras, but officials were there and some media members were there, and they heard him talking, or they heard them talking, and Boris Johnson basically told him that it was a fantastic play you made because things got really heated because Donald Trump, as I'm sure we could all guess, doesn't want to back down from his stance that Putin should be invited back. And in order to kind of quiet those complaints from either side, the back and forth that was going on, Macron kind of took a spot in the middle saying we need to work with him, but I don't know that we should invite him back. So maybe Macron is more on the side of Canada, Germany, and the UK, but of course there's no way for us to actually know that. Now, in a closing statement, Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada said, quote, "Russia has yet to change the behavior that led to its expulsion in 2014, although, as we mentioned earlier, it wasn't really an expulsion. That's a side note, back to his quote, and therefore should not be allowed back into the G7. Now, I believe this is, actually, it's not even what I believe, but it's blatantly obvious that this is a black and white issue where you unfortunately have to pick a side. Either Vladimir Putin and the Russian government has a seat or they do not. They either deserve to be there or they do not. And we also can't deny the fact that Putin did illegally take Crimea from the Ukraine. So you kind of have to weigh both arguments here. Essentially, Trump's saying we could have done something and we opted not to. And it's not Russia's fault that we didn't, right? So they tried to make a move politically. No one stepped in to stop or slow them down in any effective manner. And now, basically, what are we supposed to do? So really, you have to ask the question, what could we have done with Crimea? And ultimately, I think Donald Trump might have a point here that I don't think if Trump was president that Putin would not, and Russia, I shouldn't always put it on Putin, but if you know how the politics there works, nothing goes on without passing through his greasy little fingers. Not as little as Trump's fingers, though. What could we have done? I really don't think there's anything we could have done. I think no matter who was the leader at the time, we were not going to go to war with Russia over this small area of Crimea. The Ukraine is an important ally, but Crimea is like this tiny little area. Honestly, there's places in northern Canada that if Russia were to take over, no one would fight them about. I mean, like, we would politically fight them, but you're not going to war over it. It's not until you're taking over something that's really viewed as important, unfortunately. And for some reason, that's something that the media does not cover, is Crimea is clearly not that important. There's a few resources there that Russia wanted. They wanted to expand for military reasons. They still deny that it's them. You know what I mean? Like, they don't say it's the Russian government who's in charge there, even though it's Russian soldiers they've just taken the Russian patches off. It's actually kind of fascinating. But really, what could we have done? Well, the whole time Putin said, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. So what could Trump have done? Would he have been like, no, it's fucking you, I know it's you? That was kind of like a Bernie Sanders doing a Donald Trump impression. Anyways, that's what happens when you're sick. I think that there's nothing Donald Trump could have done. So then other sanctions were and still are placed on Russia. So there are financial repercussions for what's happened on top of the removal from the G7, right? So there are certain things that still can't be traded with Russia. There are certain things that you still can't buy from Russia. And that is going to stay in place probably indefinitely, but nothing huge, right? It's nothing like what we're seeing between the USA and China right now, where you're talking about like soybeans, which is a hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in industry every year. It's much smaller stuff that we're talking about with our trade with Russia. So then you have to ask, does it legitimize him? Because this is the argument that especially the German Chancellor Angela Merkel is using, is that she doesn't want to legitimize him. And right away, I wrote down, does it legitimize him, ? And then, does he need legitimization, ? Because I don't think you can legitimize Vladimir Putin anymore. Like, I understand that Russia isn't this big thing, but it's not the Cuban government. It's not the North Korean government. It's the fucking Russian government. Like, he literally has a bigger country than all of you except Canada, right? And obviously, size isn't everything, as girls pretend to tell you, but he does not need that legitimization, right? If you've got it swinging between your legs, you don't need to worry about whether or not size is an issue. And that's kind of what Vladimir Putin has going on, right? He has enough nuclear bombs that he doesn't need to be legitimized. Like, you cannot legitimize Russia any more than they already are. And it's kind of funny that this is coming from the Germans, you know, the whole Second World War thing, because the reason Russia built its military to where it is, same with the U.S., is the Second World War, and they both knocked Germany away and took over as world powers. So I really think that Germany is what legitimized Russia, or at least they legitimized the Soviet Union, which later became Russia. So no, I don't think you can legitimize him any more than he already is, because he's the president of fucking Russia. There's not a single person who doesn't know who he is and who Russia is, right? And I would almost hold this argument true for like Cuba, like the Castro family. There's no one in the Western world, at least, who doesn't know who the Castro family is running Cuba, right? You don't talk about Cuba and go like, what? Where's that? No, you know what the hell Cuba is. You can't legitimize it anymore if everyone knows what it is. It's kind of a dumb argument to take. But then I think the real question is, if I don't think it could legitimize him anymore, we still have these financial and trade restrictions and sanctions in place. I don't think he needs any more legitimization. I really don't think there's anything we could have done. Is the G7 the place to take this stand? And is the G7 relevant either to the world or to Russia? Like, does it hurt them at all? Well, actually, I think the G7 is a very, very good place to take this stand, because think of it like this, right? You have to kind of put it in simplest, childish terms. Because if you want a seat at the cool kids table, and the cool kids told you in 1997, because they told Canada in 96, we know what it's like to not be invited. We were invited in 96. Russia was invited to the cool kids table in 97, right? All of a sudden, in 2014, the cool kids said, you're suspended. You have to go sit over there with all those other guys. That is really upsetting for someone in high school. And guess what? It's really fucking upsetting to Russia. And it makes you look like a chump on the world stage. Now, is the G7 relevant to Russia? I think politically the G7 is very relevant to everyone involved. I think literally, no, the G7 is not relevant to anything. They don't really do anything. They just kind of, I mean, like, there's trade agreements that come out of it, and they don't even publish a statement anymore, because if you recall last year, Donald Trump first signed off on the statement, then got back to Washington and reverted that he signed off on it and said he doesn't support it anymore. Like, so they don't even make statements, joint statements anymore. It's kind of crazy. Like, basically, we all spend a shit ton of taxpayer money to, like, flaunt the fact that we're all friends and you can't fuck with us, which is something that I'm down for. And if that's the case, then yeah, like, why is Russia there, right? China's not there. Why is Russia there? I kind of agree. And it's even kind of better politically to say that, like, we invited them, we gave them a shot to come to our side of the world, and they didn't want to take it. So we said, okay, you wanted to take Crimea, we thought you were kind of behaving, Russia, and, like, you did a few bad things here and there, and then we kind of gave you a little slap on the wrist, but now you went and took over your neighbor, so we got to send you packing. You're not welcome back here. And ultimately, no, I don't think they should be invited there until they give back Crimea. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Therefore, I don't think Russia should belong in the G7, and I think that it should stay that way. Please don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and family. Tell them all about it, mention it at work, and make sure they know all about the incredible content available. This is episode 29. There are 29 episodes of awesome. Actually, let's be realistic. There's probably like 15 episodes of awesome, 5 episodes of okay, and 9 episodes of cringe. But they can listen to all of it completely free and completely ad-free. So mention it to all of them. Let them know about all the incredible content that's available in our back catalog. And just tell them that it's available every Tuesday, right? As always, thank you so much for the support, for coming back each and every week, and feel free to reach out to me absolutely anytime using the contact page over at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com or on social media, which can be found in the description for this episode on your podcast platform of choice. I had to redo that little quick read there so many times because I kept coughing through it, but I got there in the end. So if it sounds strange, my apologies. Now, I'm going to get into my rant. I know it's pretty early. I'm only just over 20 minutes in, but as I mentioned off the top, I'm really not feeling well. I wanted to get something out for you guys today to spread the conversation, and I never want to miss a week. Of course, I've missed one, and I don't plan on ever missing a week again. And I can only get better by practicing, right? So by taking a week off, then I miss a week of writing practice and ranting practice and editing practice and everything. So as I've mentioned before, I'm sort of at the stage in the podcast where it's growing well, and I'm really just trying to get better at it. And yeah, you can't get better by not doing. So even if I'm sick, I'm going to be here to record, unless like my voice breaks, and then maybe I'll have I'll do it like text to speech or something, so you'll all listen to a robot talking. Actually, no, I would never do that to you. So I wanted to get into one final topic here. This really caught my eye this week, and I was really disappointed rather. See, that's what happens when I'm sick. I can't even spit out the words that I'm trying to preach at the peoples. But I was really disappointed when I saw this. A Canadian Border Services, they raided a racetrack in Vancouver because of undocumented workers. Now, This is something, there's a farming community near where I live where this happens quite often, I would say. It makes the news like every other year. There's a big raid, and I mean, everyone knows that it's all undocumented workers, or mostly, that work there. It's just kind of like whatever. We all know it, and I don't know, they don't hurt anyone. They're like picking strawberries and peas or whatever the hell you pick in a field. And, you know, I mean, it's just the way it is, and quite frankly, I don't want those jobs. My friends don't want those jobs. But it's got to be picked by hand, some of this stuff. It's the most effective way to do it, and these people want to do it, so I'm not really opposed to it. But this one, when I first heard about this raid from BC, as I said, I was really disappointed. But the more information that comes out about it, I'm kind of torn. So I haven't really made up my mind yet on how I feel about it, but I'll get into a quick explanation, and then I will talk through my thoughts to see where I end up. So 7 undocumented Mexican men were arrested in a raid at a Canadian horse track in British Columbia after a tip to Border Patrol. Someone had discovered that a provincial employee had hired a number of undocumented immigrants to groom and walk the horses throughout the day without permits. This is a twofold issue because the jobs require special licensing from the province's Lottery and Gaming Commission, which the racetrack employee not only works for, but allegedly got these permits by accepting hundreds of dollars from each of the groomers in exchange to falsify documents for them and get them grooming permits. So all these Mexican men that were working for him, and I say that literally, like they're literally from Mexico. I'm not being super racist here. Like, not like it's some brown guy from South America. Must be a Mexican. No, literally Mexican. He had them pay several $100s so that he could fake the paperwork to get them into the course to license them to be groomers. Now, I'm kind of like, at least they had the proper training done, but he works for the BC Lottery and Gaming Commission, and he gave them false documents to get people licensed to work for him. So, it's a little sketchy. It's not really what you want to be doing. The Attorney General, as well as CBSA, the Canadian Border Services Agency, each conducted a separate investigation over the last 10 months, which culminated ultimately in this raid and soon to be the deportation of these 7 men, which were arrested for at least 1 year. So they won't be welcomed back into Canada for at least a year. There's been no further information released on the racetrack employee, the one who was in charge and did all the hiring, whether he's still employed, has been fined or charged or whatever. We don't really know. Now, along the lines of what I was saying on the farm workers who are closer to where I live, and the reason I'm not being more specific is I'm not here to bait nobody's scene. I'm not here to give you up to the government. Everybody knows what the hell's going on, and the government can stay the hell out of people's business. I don't really feel that way, but I think it's kind of wrong when someone's just working a shitty job that no one else wants to do. And I read an op-ed about this that a horse jockey actually wrote. He's a jockey that wrote it anonymously, but the editor, I guess, confirmed that it was a well-known jockey in the BC racing field, the industry. And he came out and said that these workers, they work from roughly 4 in the morning when they wake the horses up, they feed them, they start getting them ready and warmed up. Then there's a morning practice. Then they have to do like a hot cool or hot run or something. I don't know. I like horse racing. I love gambling on horse racing, especially when I was 18, because you can't go to the casino, but you can go to the racetrack. Y'all know where I was at. But it's a lot of work, right? I don't really know the ins and outs of it. I don't know the definitions for it, but basically they wake them up at 8, they feed them. The jockeys come in and do a practice run in the morning. Then they have to take the horses and cool them down. So you have to keep running with them back and forth, basically, slower and slower until their muscles cool down nicely. Then you have to groom them because they're covered in mud, and you have to get them ready for the race tonight. Then there's another warm-up before the races start at 6. So now they've already been at work for 14 hours at 6 o'clock at night. The races begin. You're going to be there until the end at like 11:30, 12, right, when the races are wrapped up. And then you still need to cool down the horses that run in the last race, and that takes 45 minutes to get them cooled down. You got to groom them so they can be put back into their trailers and brought back to the farm. So you literally work from like 4 a.m. to midnight, 3 or 4 days a week, however often they're running races at that racetrack. It's a crazy intensive job that it's got to be super hard to find people that want to do it. And I'm sure there's time in the middle of the day where they can take a nap or something. I'm certain of that. But it's a super intensive job, right? You're like sleeping in a horse stable pretty much, catching up on some sleep before you got to wake up and run these horses some more. It's a lot of work, and it's specialized work, right? That's why you need this special license and training for it. Now, I kind of want to get away from just the horse races in general to the idea of a workplace raid, because the issue here is, of course, that there are people working who aren't paying taxes because they're here illegally. So this is a topic that I really haven't touched on, and I want to do a bigger one on it, but I don't want to focus on Canada. I want to focus on the U.S. when I do a bigger topic, only because it's not so much an issue here in Canada. So I had this discussion actually just before this happened with my parents, actually, because I am adamantly against illegal immigration. Like, I really don't think that it's okay to just walk across the border. And I mean, especially here in Canada where we offer things like free healthcare, I don't like the idea that someone can just come in and I'm paying for that. However, here it's not really an issue, right? When you look at the US, it's a big issue, right? When you look at the European Union, it's a big issue. It's not a big issue here. Not right now, at least, right? So, yes, there are a number of people that make their way here. A lot of them have refugee claims. I have, in my life, been around people who have made refugee claims and been accepted, and people who haven't. But those who have been accepted had genuine claims. For the most part, if you're walking across not across, but vertically up and through the United States to Canada, bro, like, you want to be here and you want to be a part of what we have here. So I think we need to find a way to accept it. Like, okay, you want to arrest these 7 guys? Fine. Why are you deporting them when they're doing a job no one here wants to do? Like, I think if you're working in a professional status, right, if you are an engineer, an accountant, a doctor, anything like that, and you are illegally working here, yes, we have to deport you because you are claiming that the Canadian government supports what you do, right? Whereas these guys and people working in farms and nannies and, daycare operators and construction workers and whatnot, like, no one thinks that you're illegal here. You know what I mean? Like, we all know, and we're all fine with it, right? We've accepted it. It's a part of our culture. It's not as ingrained as it may be in the US, but it is a part of our culture that, sure, some people can turn a blind eye to, but the way that I look at it is, why aren't we just saying, okay, you're here already, why not allow you to become a citizen, or rather, I'm sorry, allow you to become a resident, but not a citizen, right? So this way you have to pay taxes, but you can't vote. And if you want to vote, you can apply for citizenship and go through it the same way everyone else has to. You got to go on the list, you got to be approved, you have to write all these tests, prove you can speak English, do this, that, and the other thing, and name all the prime ministers, and blah, 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 know all your history. Like, I've actually helped a friend study for the citizenship test back at an old job, and holy hell, it is difficult. The English especially. There's, like, an English test that, like, I write, I write podcasts, I've written music for a long time, I've written jokes for a while, and I'm looking at this English test going, what in the hell? It's like, find the 47 grammatical errors in this small paragraph, and it's like 6 or 7 lines, and like I could find, like, say 30 of them, and we're still missing 17. I'm like, oh, fuck, I have no idea. Like, it's hard. It's really difficult to pass our citizenship test. And I think that's what we should do. If you come here illegally and you want to live here, tell us you're here. Be like, yo, it's me. This is where I'm living. You have to have a fixed address. You can't be homeless because we can't afford to support more homeless people. For those of you who don't know, we have a huge homeless problem in this area right now, especially in Ontario, BC, and Quebec, specifically the big cities, right? Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. But I mean, like, you can find homeless people here. Like, I'm about an hour away from Toronto, and we have a huge homeless population. There's actually one in the forest right near my house. There's a big tent city set up. It's kind of crazy. And it exists everywhere. There's like, I know of 3 tent cities around the city I live in, full of tents and homeless people. It's crazy, right? We can't support more homeless people. But if you come here, you have work, you can support yourself, you can support whatever family you're here with, or whatever family you're trying to bring here or whatever. Apply as a resident. And then if you want to bring your family, you can then apply to, and they can come here legally. They can become citizens, but you cannot unless you leave and come back. And you can apply for citizenship that way. But as a resident, you should be able to support someone coming here to become a citizen. Like, why can't your kids and your wife do that, right? You shouldn't be able to because you snuck here illegally. But we're not going to send you back, right? Doesn't make sense to send. It just doesn't make sense. Like, you're working. You're fucking working, right? So why don't we just collect tax money from you, right? These guys were working. They were paid by the provincial government in BC because that's who they worked for. And we should have just collected some tax money and told them, thanks for wanting to live here so badly. Thank you for finding a job and not just sitting on our system. But you have to pay into our system. So you're going to have to pay taxes. We'll let you get a license. We'll let you buy a house. We'll let you or rent a house or whatever, right? You'll have residency status. Basically, you just can't vote. And I think as a resident, if you're convicted of a felony, or in Canada, we call them criminal offenses, then we send you back, right? And I don't care what it is, if it's theft, if it's whatever. If you go to jail for something, you don't go to jail, you go to Mexico. In these men's case, you get sent back to your country. But otherwise, why are we paying to send back 7 guys? Because we pay for it, right? And these are 7 men who are working full-time jobs, contributing to society in their own way, just like all of us do, right? Just like all of us do. Why? It actually irks me that we treat people this way, because we are not so much better than them. We really aren't, right? Like, my whole family are immigrants, right? My dad himself is an immigrant. My great-grandparents on my mother's side, all 4 of them are immigrants from Ireland and the UK. My father's from Portugal, and they all came here legally, right? Legally, L-E, not illegally, just to clarify. But I can't look at someone who makes their way here illegally in a negative way, because I understand the struggle, because I've heard it, right? Like, I've seen it. Like, literally, I know from secondhand experience from my closest family members what it's like, how hard it is to come here, how hard it is to make that change, how hard it is to learn to speak English and assimilate into society and give up your life that you had before, right? We're talking about guys who are walking here from Mexico, giving up everything just for a shot of living the life that we all have access to, right? I think if you make it here and you've made something of yourself, if you can prove that you found work, any kind of work, I don't care what it is, then why can't we allow you to stay? Because these 7 dudes were contributing to society. We just have to tax them. That's it, right? We just have to tax them. And then it's all well and good. It's all fine. And we can monitor it then, right? Because right now, There was another story about how 10 months ago, when this investigation started on this racetrack, it was a whole different crew of guys. But they have to move around, right? They got to work at this racetrack, that racetrack, go do some construction, go do some farming, because they're afraid of getting caught. So they're always on the move, right? You don't want to sit still, which makes sense. But if we just say, dude, no, these 7 guys, they know what the hell they're doing. They're really good at working with horses. They've figured it out. They're masters of what they can do. And they're making horse racing safer for both the riders and the horses by becoming really experts at both grooming and health management of the horses, right? Cooling them down between practices and warming them up before races and everything. That seems like the sort of thing that we should reward. And I don't understand why we're not. And I don't understand why my federal tax money is flying them home. Because I think that to have 7 guys who know what they're doing at a racetrack is quite beneficial. And I understand they came here illegally. I don't understand why we can't offer them permanent residency. Right? We shouldn't call it permanent, though, because like I said, if you break the law, you should be sent back. But if you stay here legally, become a resident, never break the law, well, what's the problem? Whatever, like a guy gets a speeding ticket, fine, that's nothing, right? As long as he's not stealing, killing people, hurting people, why can't he stay? Why can't his family come here legally? Why can't he sponsor them to come here? I don't understand it. And I understand the struggles that he comes from. And I cannot fathom a country like ours that I'm sitting in and speaking from right now, a country that doesn't have the foresight and the decency while at the same time fighting for rights that never existed before for other groups of people. Why is it that we attack migrants? Like, why is it that this is the one group of people that almost the world around people still haven't come to terms with, right? We accept refugees all the time. And guess what? They are clearly a benefit to our society. Here in Canada, we're doing it right. Why? I don't know. I don't know why it's working here. I don't know why it's not working in the US. I don't know why it is working here, but it is. So why is it that we can't just say, come here, right? Come here legally. And if you come here illegally, we'll offer you to stay if you can prove you have work. And I mean, like, you have to prove you have work. If you don't have a job, no, you can't stay. You cannot be homeless here. We can't, especially here because of our winters. That's not me being cruel. That's me saying I don't feel like hearing about a bunch of dead people because we get them every year. And I don't need more dead homeless people, right? There's been, I think, and I moved to this house that I'm in right now is my family home. We moved here in 2003, and I think there's been 2 or 3 dead homeless people. One was hit by a train. The other 2 just died in the woods near our house. That's 3, right? Since in 15, 16 years. So I don't need to hear about more of those people. I don't want you coming here if you can't support yourself, if you can't find a place to live with warmth, especially in the winter. But if you can, I think you should be allowed to stay. Thank you all for listening and sticking through this with me. My voice, it took me a long time to record the last few sections there. But thank you all either way for sticking through. I hope my rant made sense. Like I said, I kept coughing, so there's a bunch of stuff I had to cut out. And I've listened back to it, and I'm pretty sure I put it together well, and you can still follow it. It makes sense, but if not, let me know, and I can totally clarify anything that I said. I really, as always, encourage you to take these discussions outside into the real world with your friends or with me over on social media somewhere. As always, this podcast is completely ad-free. My name is Jacob Paveo, and all that I ask is you share it with your family and friends, subscribe on whatever podcasting app you happen to be using, and tell your friends about me each and every week. Until next time, folks, hopefully I'm better next week. Hopefully none of you are getting sick right now, and we're all well and good next week. So until then, keep on laughing and keep on learning.